Consider, if you will, the task of a translator of poetry. When translating a poem, it's relatively straightforward to translate the content of the poem, but translating the form is another matter. Now remember, content is what the poem is saying. Form is how the poem says it. And when we think about poetic form, we might be thinking about the rhyme scheme, repetitions of sounds or of words or of lines, the meter, the rhythm, maybe the length of lines, or even the shape of the poem on the page. And here are some terrific examples of some shape poems. There's the Leaning Tower of Pizza, The Cow Jumped Over the Moon, and a poem about hats. And if you want to see more, go to funnypoems.co.uk. Now let's consider this task by looking at a really simple poem. So here's Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. Although I didn't realize until making this video that there are actually several more verses of this poem that most of us don't know. Okay, now if we look at this poem, again, the content's pretty simple, wouldn't be too hard to translate. What about the form, though? So we've got Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. We've got these 7-syllable lines, and they're very singable. They need to fit in that song, probably, for translating. And we've got some rhymes here. So we've got star and R that rhyme, and high and sky that rhyme. Now let's say we decide to translate this poem into French. This would not be a hard task. Probably a high school French student could do it, or we could just pop it into Google Translate. And if we do, we'll probably end up with a very little translation, something like the one that you see here on the right. In this case, the translation just matches the words pretty closely. It's got the content down. But what about the form? Okay, so in the English we have star, R, high sky. If you look at the French, the first line ends in étoile, the second line ends in tu es, third line du monde, fourth line du ciel. These words don't rhyme at all. And as far as the meter goes, could we sing this song to that lovely little tune? Well, maybe the first line, brille, brille, petite étoile, comme j'aimerais avoir qui tu es. I kind of have to fudge it on that second line to get all those syllables to fit in. It doesn't sing quite as nicely as I would like. Now let me show you another translation. So take a look here on the left. This translation sings very nicely, and I could sing it for you, but I'd be embarrassed both by my bad singing and by my bad French accent. But you'll notice that it does rhyme. So we've got étoile and dévoile. We've got firmament, diamant. Okay, and then the last two don't rhyme, but hey, 2 out of 3, we'll call it good. And as I said, again, this has got the right syllables for this to sing very nicely if we put it into that song. The thing is, though, that in making sure that we've matched the form of the original poem, we've actually had to change up the content. So take a look at the right. If we were to translate that version of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star into English, it wouldn't look exactly like the original. We've got shine, shine, little star, in the night that unfolds itself. Up there in the firmament, you sparkle like a diamond. Shine, shine, little star, watch over those who sleep below. And I gotta say, there are some really nice lines in there, but the content has definitely changed. Now, if we all spoke the same foreign language, I would absolutely love to give you an assignment where we play with translation. But since we don't all speak the same foreign language, we're going to play with translations in English. Now, what do I mean by that? Okay, your task is going to be to write 3 versions of the same poem using 3 different poetic forms. Meaning you'll write a poem, say, in free verse, and then you'll take the same ideas in that poem, put it into, say, sonnet form. And then you'll take the same ideas in that poem and put it into a form like a villanelle or a haiku or a limerick. Let me give you an example of this. I'll share some of my own bad poetry. This is a poem that I wrote several years ago. It was when I was first starting to date my husband. Let me read it to you. Already your mystery is tattered at the edges, so I might not look closer for fear it dissolves. True, God counts the sparrows and thrives, but then again I might be done in by the sweetness of my own little finger, or my heart stop, trampled by a butterfly. Now the content of this poem, or the idea that I was playing with here, is that it's a little bit risky to look at something too closely. If you think about when you first start being sort of interested in someone, maybe you don't know that much about them yet, but they seem sort of wonderful and maybe a little bit superhuman, maybe a little bit mysterious. And you know that the better you get to know them, the more you're going to realize that they're not superhuman, that maybe they make annoying noises when they eat their food, or they leave their socks lying around, things like that. So paying too close attention in that case will destroy that person's sort of mystique. On the other hand, I believe as an artist, you realize that the closer you look at things, the more beautiful they become. So if you put something under the microscope and really examine it, things that seem ordinary just become extraordinary. And so the other risk of looking at something too closely is you kind of fall in love with it. Anyway, that's the idea I was trying to get in this poem here. That's my content. And for form, I've written this in free verse. There's no rhyme, there's no meter. I've got short lines. I've got lots of enjambment. And jamming is when, instead of stopping a poetic line right at the end of where there's a little bit of punctuation, you kind of split the line in the middle so that the second half bumps onto the next line. And, I've lowercased my i's and written yours, YR, which is something that the poet Indazaki Shange did. So I'm kind of copying her there in that respect. Now, a little while after that, I took this poem and I wrote it as a sonnet. So the content is pretty much the same, but the form is very different. And let me read this to you. Too soon your secret self will start to fade. I dare not glance too close for fear it tear, recede, resolve to dust, dissolve to air, and you by this inspection prove betrayed. But more, it's knowledge by which love is made, and if I looked too close and laid you bare, my heart could be thrust through just by the stare. This risk of instant love leaves me afraid. There's danger sweet that lurks in tiny things. I never look too close for fear that I grow deaf from songs the lovelorn field mouse sings, or worship bees, the flutter of your eye, be knocked down dumb by moths with flickering wings, or strangled by a hair, lose breath and die. Again, content started out the same, but because I put it into sonnet form, the content had to change. It was inevitable. So the first thing to realize about a sonnet is that they have to be 14 lines. And I was taking a short poem and making it into a longer one, so obviously I had to add some stuff to talk about some of the ideas a little more. Sonnets are also typically written in iambic pentameter. That means you have 10 syllables in each line and you have a rhythm that sounds like this. Da-dun, 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 da-dun. Too soon your secret self will start to fade. Trying to get the lines to fit into that rhythm took a lot of tinkering. But the biggest thing that affected the content here was actually the rhyme scheme. So if you look, I've got A, B, B, A, B, B, A, C, D, C, D, which means the A's all rhyme, the B's all rhyme, the C's all rhyme, the D's all rhyme. The problem with rhymes, in English at least, is there are really not all that many words that rhyme, which mean if you're trying to make sure your words rhyme, it kind of limits you and it affects what you're able to say. Two versions of the same poem. Is one better than the other? Well, I guess you could answer that question if you had one that you preferred, or maybe they're both crappy. But either way, they're different. And the process of translating one poem into another form really woke me up to how much form affects content. So again, your task is to write 3 versions of the same poem using 3 different poetic forms. So you'll pick something to write about, maybe your delightful cat, and you'll start by writing a poem in whatever form is most comfortable for you. So you might try writing a free verse poem about your beloved cat. Then you'll pick a different poetic form, like, say, a sonnet, and rewrite your free verse poem as a sonnet. You'll pick a third poetic form, maybe a villanelle, haiku, limerick. There are lots of different poetic forms to choose from, and you'll rewrite your free verse poem as a villanelle. And then I'll ask you to reflect on the process of translating the same content into different forms. Now, I will add one caveat here. At the very least, one poetic form needs to be challenging. Don't choose 3 super easy forms.